Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there, and welcome back to Reimagining Love. Today's guest is actually a returning guest here to chat with me for the second time. Britt Frank first joined me on the show back in June 2023 to talk about the science of stuckness. And now today, we're talking about shadow work and parts work and embracing all aspects of ourselves, including and perhaps especially those parts that we may try to hide or that we feel ashamed of. And you know that I am absolutely here for anything and everything that helps us hold more complexity in our relationships and within ourselves. Britt Frank is a clinician, speaker, and trauma specialist, and the author of The Science of Stuck and the Getting Unstuck Workbook. And her latest book is called Align Your Mind, Tame Your Inner Critic, and Make Peace with Your Shadow using the power of parts work. Her work's been featured by NPR, Forbes, Esquire, New York Magazine, and the New York Times. Today, we talk about why parts work is having such a big moment these days and why our parts are not the problem, how to turn our inner critic into a high-performing coach, and how to align our minds and be honest about all of our, quote, good parts and our, quote, bad parts, as we sometimes are tempted to label them, so that we can show up more fully in our most important relationships. So let's dive right in to my conversation with Britt Frank. Britt, welcome back to Reimagining Love. I'm so glad to see you.
It's so good to see you again. Thanks for having me back on.
Yes, I was saying before we started that you're somebody I'm so fond of, but we seem to have a hard time getting together unless you're publishing a book. So just keep writing the book so that we can keep seeing each other.
Done and done.
I want to start by asking you the question that we ask all of our guests. Are you ready for it?
Hit me. Let's go.
Okay. All right, Britt. How are you reimagining love in one of your important relationships these days?
Oh, okay. So this is so timely. And because I know your work, I knew that question was coming. And so I really wanted to give you a non-vulnerable answer, just sort of like a stock. But the reality is, and I've not talked about this publicly because it's just happened in the last couple of weeks, is that I went no contact with all of my family of origin. And that was one of the ways I've chosen to sadly but peacefully reimagine love as a relationship in which we're either working towards something or we're not. But if we're not, I can't participate in it.
Oh my gosh. Ugh,
Yeah.
that is so big. My husband always says it sucks when the hard thing and the right thing are the same thing.
Oh, your husband is very wise. It really does. And the only thing that makes the hard thing bearable is knowing that it's the right thing, but it still stinks. So I can dish out boundaries and healthy family dynamics clinically all day. And then, oh yeah, doing it is like a whole nother ball game. But it's been coming on for years and it's very heartbreaking and tragic and right and good and peaceful and necessary and crappy.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that you may just be like, move along. But I guess the thing I'm wondering is, was there a moment of deep knowing where was there, as Oprah says, were there bricks upside your head and then the whole brick wall? Like can you tell us about kind of like that final knowing, or that feels too fresh?
No. Again, I wouldn't have brought it up if I wasn't going to go there. Let me put a huge juicy nugget out and then tell you we're not going there. I don't want to talk about it. No, I'm fine talking because I think it's important to talk about. And I didn't have this modeled for me. So if someone's listening and this is helpful, fine, we can go there. I almost think it's easier when there's a big brick that's being shoved in your face. And I have had relationships, romantic relationships, particularly, and friendships where it was such a clear, like, this is bad. It's overtly bad. There's nothing to do but walk away. And I think it's harder when it's more death by a thousand cuts style relating, where nothing big ever happens or has to happen. It's sort of a nagging, gnawing knowing that it's been coming on for years. And then it was I think maybe perimenopause brought on I have no capacity to play pretend in relationships anymore. That's a fun one.
No, we tend to run menopause. That perimenopause is like, I'm out of my Fs. I got
None.
none left.
It's a reckon. And yes, medical. Yes, I'm glad we're getting medical information, but there's a
Sure.
psychological,
Mhm.
psycho-spiritual reckoning that comes. And it wasn't that anything happened. It was more of a quiet surrender to the reality of what is and an unwillingness to participate anymore. So it was a very, nothing happened. There was no, and I'm done. It was just sort of a quiet, okay, well, I'm done. And now I will pick up my marbles and go home kind of feeling.
Yeah. Okay. I think that distinction you made of like the kind of easy, obvious, this has to not, it's never easy. It's never easy, but the kind of obvious, this moment was when I knew there can be a kind of clarity there. And this one, this death by a thousand cuts because it's so then anchored in self trust, right? You can't put it necessarily on that one thing out there.
Exactly. I mean, it's gross in any form or fashion. The quiet
Yeah.
ones are because, like, but was it that bad? Was anything really
Right.
that? And the gaslighting that goes along with that question is really intense. So I am reimagining love by really sitting and wrestling with that question myself. Is life short and love is real? And what do I want it to mean in the context of the life I have left?
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're caring for yourself in these last 2 weeks? I think that would be good to hear too.
Yeah. I have parts of me that are like, "You took it to such a depressing place." Like, I wanna be all fun and
We shall be.
sassy, and
We
it's
shall be
like,
sassy in a moment.
"Great." That's fine. It's what's real. So, incapable of BS. I am taking care of myself by really leaning on the amazing women in my life. Like, I have such wonderful, life-giving relationships, which are also part of the reason that I was no longer willing to tolerate crumbs, because when you're getting fed from real rich relationships, it's really hard to continue to self deny and go, well, it's fine and it's not that bad and whatever. So I'm doing things like leaning into my friendships, making room for play and pleasure. And I did a circus show a few weeks ago. Same week I launched my books. I got to wear sequins and twirl around. And what else did I do? I bought like fiction. Now that the book's launched, I can read again. So I bought this beautiful hardcover fiction that was like candy on the bookshelf. And so I'm working very diligently to mother myself and let myself be mothered by everything around me, and not just women. Any solid relationship that's life giving is maternal energy, and it's fortunately available more places than just your biological mother.
That's right. Oh, I love that you are reminding us of how inextricably bound pain and pleasure are. That is you really, really inviting in pleasure is how you are tending to your pain.
Yeah, not to cover it or numb it, but to counterbalance it, to make sure there's an equal something to the mess over here. Is I'm not this doesn't replace this. This doesn't cancel out this. They're gonna both coexist in this very messy, non-defined, nonlinear way. And it's working. And circus is an extreme enough sport that that does get the job done. Like your mind is not thinking and overthinking and ruminating when you're spinning upside down in sequence.
Oh, I mean, just the extreme sport paired with a sequence is just like that is like the essence of paradox. You're using all of your muscles and also sequence. That's fabulous.
And sequins make everything better. So yeah.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous,
Yeah.
fabulous. Okay, well, my dear, you did it again. You are a really gifted translator from the mental health world to the world of regular people. And so your first book was called The Science of Stuck. And now you are back with us again with your new book, which is called Align Your Mind, Tame Your Inner Critic and Make Peace with Your Shadow using the power of parts work. So can you start us off? I would love to hear about how you got from the science of stuck to align your mind. Like what was going on for you and you're like, okay, I'm going to write again.
So the Science of Stuck was really my here's everything I've ever learned, my show and tell bag of here's this modality and here's how to make it simple for your life. And one of the chapters in Science of Stuck was about shadow work and parts work and how to connect with these aspects of ourselves that we either don't like or that we're disconnected from or that we've disowned. And parts work is my first love in the psychology world, is the very first modality that I came to as a client that really moved the needle for me personally. Then I got trained in it. And if I could get away with it, I would do parts work and nothing but parts work all day. And so I'm so happy I got to do that and expands that chapter in Science of Stuck into a whole book where I can just nerd out on parts work for 65,000 words. And I had a blast doing
You sure did. Well, and also parts work and specific. So parts work is the big umbrella. And then IFS, internal family systems, is one of the modalities under the big umbrella of parts work. And this whole part, I mean, mental health right now, like I keep saying that therapists are the cool kids finally. But I think like parts work and IFS in particular are the coolest of the cool kids. Why do you think that IFS and parts work are having such a moment right now? What do you think it is that like, how have we collectively really kind of attached ourselves to this work? What's going on?
I love that you said that. And my inner teens that were never cool. Like there's never
Mm-mm.
been a time in my adolescence where I was the cool kid in the room. So
Nope.
I'm like,
Me neither.
IFS and parts work are the cool kids in the cafeteria. This is like a moment for my adolescent healing parts. But so I'm so distracted by that part of your question. I do think parts work is having a moment because it's the only thing that makes sense of the madness. It's like, how can people be so polarized against each other? How can people be so polarized against themselves and say, this is what I'm about, but also say this and, say that my values are this, but I'm acting like this. We can't all be crazy and we can't all be hypocrites. It can't be that all of us are just disordered, broken people. Parts work is the only thing that I've come across that allows for the full range of human experience to happen within one person. In one moment, I could be giving and generous, and I could be selfish and jealous and bitter and petty and spiritual and lofty and intellectually curious and judgy. And I want to watch my crappy TV shows and eat donuts and not care about anyone else but myself. All of that can exist within 1 second in the umbrella of parts work. And it was a very comforting thing for me to realize that I don't have to get rid of parts of myself. I need to lead them. I need to harmonize or align with them. I just don't think there's anything else that makes life make as much sense as parts work, at least the interior life.
I agree. I agree. I've always been drawn to, right, models that help us hold complexity rather than collapse it. And it is so natural for me to move from the intra-psychic to the interpersonal to the cultural. So that's really, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that maybe the reason that IFS and parts work has got our attention is because it feels like a micro process inside of us that kind of mirrors the macro of the polarization and the loud, contradictory, competing, chaotic conversation that's happening at the collective. That's really an interesting way of looking at it.
That's how I see it. And it works interpersonally. If you understand how parts operate, your conversations are going to be more skillful. And in the workforce, it's going to be a lot less circular conversations and meetings that go nowhere. It's just a great framework that doesn't require any clinical gatekeeping. It's not like you need to go to psychotherapy for 20 years to start to understand how parts work operates. And I love how accessible it is.
Hmm. Okay, we'll put a pin in the relationship stuff because in a little bit, once we've laid more of a base, I do want to come back and ask you about, specifically about romantic relationships, how understanding our own parts helps us. But maybe we also extend it to work. I think that's also a really good realm. So when you say the title of this book is Align Your Mind. And I know in part that word align, you end up kind of breaking down and giving us an acronym for how we work with our parts. But talk to us about what does it mean to align your mind?
Well, I like how it just sounds aligned in your mind. It just has a really lovely ring to it. And I'm a word nerd, so there's that. But I love the idea of alignment because it's not about fixing what's broken or changing or getting rid of. Alignment is about creating a relationship that works. And like tires on a car, when the tires are misaligned, the car doesn't run. When the tires are aligned, things go smoothly. When your spine is aligned, all of your systems and organs, everything operates better when there's an alignment, a physical alignment with tires or a spine. And I think the same is true for our minds. You don't need to banish your inner critic. You don't need to kill your ego. What if we could align everything so it's in a right relationship to each other? And that seems like an easier lift for anyone than now you have to get rid of parts of yourself. You got to tell this part of you to take a hike, and this part of you to shut up. It's like, yeah, but what if you could align it and there was room for everybody at the table? So I love the idea of alignment. It feels both gentle and realistic and doable.
One of the analogies that you give in the book, and I don't know who it was that said it, was like your body is made up of parts and you don't, you want those parts to be in relation to each other. You don't talk about banishing. I mean, sometimes I guess you got to get rid of an appendix or things like that, but like we are made of parts. So why is it so challenging for us to kind of cross that bridge and imagine that our mind is also made of parts? I think that makes it just so that's such an inviting way to look at it. And so then it isn't about, as you're saying, it isn't about labeling good parts and bad parts, which I would love for you to talk about that. Like, how on earth is our inner critic or our ego, how are those not bad parts?
That's like saying your foot's bad because you kicked something. Like your foot's not the problem. Your decision to kick something might have caused damage and that decision wasn't good, but like your foot is not your problem. It's like, well, my foot kicked a wall, therefore my foot is bad, therefore I should have nothing to do with my foot and I should get rid of it. It's like that doesn't sound that makes zero sense. It's really easy to understand it if you look at it like that. Your inner critic, like any part of your body, if it's making decisions to cause harm, that's a problem. But the inner critic is just energy that we can use to either move us toward our values or away from it. Criticism is not inherently bad. An inner critic, properly trained, so to speak, is a high performance coach. I don't want to go through a life where there's not one constructively critical thought in my head. If I didn't have a constructive critic, how am I going to know when I need to learn something or do better or talk to someone who knows more than I do about something? Because maybe my skill set needs to be sharpened in an area or 20. And so the inner critic is not the problem. Same thing with our ego. And, I get why there are certain spiritual traditions that are like, you got to kill your ego and you got to dissolve it. I get it. But we can't live in that realm of oneness. We're all source consciousness because we have human bodies and meat suits that we have to keep moving. It doesn't work. So, like, if you're high on psychedelics, yeah, ego dissolution and we are all one is great. But then you go to work tomorrow morning and you need your ego to help you filter things. And you need your ego to help you decide what's the right behavior at a funeral versus a football game. And our ego is a very helpful source of information. It is not good when it's behind the driver's seat. And that's really parts work is about keep all the parts, but we need someone else in charge. Because when my addict parts are in charge of my decisions, life is very bad. When I am in charge of my addict parts, I can use their energy to be resourceful and scrappy and innovative to get things that I need or want.
So when you talk about who's in charge, Dick Schwartz has evolved the IFS model to talk about the self. And the image that works really well for him is that the self is the head of this table, right? And all of the parts are kind of around this conference room table. Is that the image that you like as well? Or do you have how do you imagine the self vis-a-vis the parts?
Yeah, I love that because it's just so easy. And higher self, divine self, Christ consciousness, like all of the different major religions and spiritual traditions have a version. Self with a capital S is just an easy one for me. So, I like the captain of the team, the inner CEO, the head of the table, the one in charge, the one who observes the thoughts, not the thoughts. The I who sees the things. I like Dick Schwartz's take on self. I'm good with that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like when we are being led by self rather than a part.
Yeah, but when people ask me like, "Well, how do I know if I'm in a in self or am I in a part or what's going on?" It's not hard to tell. And IFS and the book's not IFS specifically, it's heavily inspired by it, and I took a lot of IFS concepts and went rogue with them, but I did keep this because I don't have any other way to explain it that I think is helpful. The Dick Schwartz calls them the 8 C's of the self. So all these C words, curiosity, connection, compassion, clarity, confidence, competence, all of those C words are your little tells that you're in capital S self. So if someone is being reactive or judgmental or horribly fearful or frozen or overwhelmed or whatever, those are not C words. So it's really easy to tell if you're in self based on, well, how centered are you? You can be upset and still calm and clear in your mind. I could be grieving and be profoundly devastated, but still confident and capable of making decisions that are in my best interest and that align with my values. So I think those C words that he uses in IFS, I think that it's simple and elegant and gets the job done beautifully. So I use the same way. I go the same direction.
Okay, so stay there for a moment because what you're saying is that we can be in self and experiencing an emotion like sadness. Can we be in self and experiencing emotion like anger?
Yeah. It's like emotional regulation, I think. And I'm delighted that nervous system stuff has become part of the Cool Kids Club online. It's hilarious to me that, like, optimize your nervous system for emotional regulation is sort of like super trendy. But regulation doesn't mean calm. Emotional regulation is essentially the physiology of self. And so we can be grieving and sad. We can be frustrated and angry. But if I'm frustrated and angry at you, if I'm in self, I can have a conversation about it. You and I can dialogue about it. I can make decisions for how I want to manage this conflict. If you're not in self, then I'll just pop off and say whatever I'm thinking. And I used to do that, and that doesn't go well.
Makes a mess to clean up.
Very much so.
I like what you're saying that there are certain behavioral tells that also let you know when you're still in self. You're able to make decisions. You're able to stay in connection. And there's, I guess, a curiosity. I mean, curiosity is one of the C words, right? That then kind of guides a desire to put the problem in between you instead of instead of it being the problem being the other person or the problem being yourself.
Or the problem being one of your parts. When people say, I'm such a addict or I'm just an anxious person, that is labeling the problem as the part. You have a part of you who's anxious. You have a part of you who does a thing or wants to do a thing, but the parts aren't the problem. Usually it's the pain that's the problem, and the parts are the ones coping with the problem. My angry parts, my petty parts, my jealous parts, they're actually not the problem. They're desire is to cope with the pain of some problem, and they do it in really unhealthy ways if I am not in charge of them. It's sort of like if a parent goes out of town and the kids have a big blowout party, right? The kids aren't the problem. The problem is there's no oversight and there's nobody keeping tabs on what they're doing. Again, not to blame parents.
That's right. We're not here to blame the parents. But yes, that's right. That's so interesting. I came up this week. I was teaching my undergrads about infidelity, and I was giving the god-awful example of when a kid or a teen knows about their parents' infidelity. And some kids, report it, and some kids don't report it. And I said, if anybody in this lecture hall was in that spot, whether you told or didn't tell, you did exactly the right thing for where you were in that moment. It's a spot you ought not have been in. But whatever you did to cope with it, that's not the problem.
Yes, exactly. The pain, the problem is not the person. The problem is not our parts, but we treat our parts as if they are the problem. Anxiety is the perfect example, right? If I go to an auto mechanic and I say my check engine light is on, they're not going to say, well, you have check engine light disorder. But we do that with anxiety. I have anxiety, therefore I have anxiety disorder. I have depression, therefore I have depression disorder. And that's just not, in my opinion, accurate.
Oof, we label the pain rather than really trying to understand what is the problem that fuels the pain. Okay, so if there are no bad parts, what in your experience tend to be the parts that we struggle the most with? Are there particular ones that you feel like we get the judgiest of or the most ashamed of?
Yeah. And again, my disclaimer, Dick Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts, really gets into the deep end of the pool with this, but my quick disclaimer is when I say there are no bad parts, that doesn't mean that I need to tolerate your parts that are causing me harm. It doesn't mean that, oh, well, you have no bad parts. So the fact that you're harming me means I need to offer you compassion and love. It's like, no, my job is to offer compassion to all of my parts. I don't need to tolerate yours when they're coming at me in a way that's not safe or healthy or loving or kind. So that's my disclaimer on that. And so the parts that tend to get demonized often are parts that we associate with habits. So overindulgers or restrictors or bingers, parts that compulsively seek to numb pain by doing a thing that's not good for us. That part tends to get I hear it all the time. I'm sure you do too. I just hate the part of me that makes me go and drink. I just hate that part of that thing that takes over when, Eliza Schlesinger, the comic, I love her work. And she talks about the party goblin. She's like, there's that little part of you that comes out and next thing you know, you're blackout drunk. I'm paraphrasing. But indulger parts tend to get demonized pretty quickly. And I understand why. The behaviors can be devastating and life-threatening. So yes, problem behaviors, but those parts aren't bad. People pleasers, codependent. I mean, I would have identified as a raging codependent, people pleasing love addict, in my history. And I would have said, oh my God, my picker is broken. I just hate the part of me that gets attracted to toxic partners. And it's like, that part of me is not bad. That part of me is trying to help, but that's not a bad part either. And so any behavior that we struggle with that we don't like, we tend to associate it with a part and then decide that the part is the problem.
Rather than getting curious. What is this part trying to solve for? What is this part trying to protect me from? What is the story this part is carrying that I don't yet understand?
Yes. And I know people will say, because I've heard it, this sounds like so much effort and time to try to figure all of this out. And my response to that is, I know, but what's the alternative? Because you can white knuckle your way out of a bad habit, but how sustainable is that? New Year's resolutions fail largely because we try to change behavior without understanding what are the dynamics that are making this behavior make sense to us at all in the first place.
Yeah, we're going completely top down.
Correct.
Your disclaimer was about, right, that because it's your part, I have to tolerate it. The other disclaimer is I don't get to say to you, Britt, that wasn't me that was doing that. That was my part, right? That's also the other disclaimer is that my part's behavior, that's not an excuse, right? I'm still accountable because of this capital S self at the head of the table, right? Can you talk to us about that? Like how that we can't use our part's behavior as an excuse.
Which is empowering, but also infuriating because it's like, well, I didn't mean it. It was my snarky part popped off on you because you triggered me. And it's easy to say that. And it's easy to say I was triggered and that's why I did it. Or, it was one of my inner child parts who came out and threw the plates at the wall. And that's not my fault because I was triggered. And I do think that's disempowering because it totally ignores the reality that we all have a self available inside us. Now, some people don't have access to the resources that they need or the safety that they need to get a hold of it. But I'm not talking about those situations. Generally speaking, it's really empowering to know you can take accountability for bad behavior without annihilating yourself with shame. It can be, you know what? Myself wasn't around to manage these parts and they did some pretty bad things, but self doesn't shame the parts. Self can take accountability and say, I made a mistake here, or I really behaved in a way that I don't want to be this person that says these things and does these things, but it's on me to manage my parts. It's not your job to avoid triggering me so that I never have to.
In fact, at the highest level, when your behavior has the power to activate one of my parts, you are gifting me the opportunity to practice self-leadership.
Well said. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity.
It is a little training ground. We had said before that you love the sound of align your mind, but it is also an acronym for a process that we can use to do our shadow work. And so tell us what shadow work is. And then if you could talk us through how we can use A.L.I.G.N to kind of move ourselves through a bit of shadow work.
I love a good acronym. Those just make me happy. And so shadow work, which I also think has gotten popularized, but also misunderstood because it can get really esoteric. And it's like, I need to be on a month-long quest in order to access my shadow. And
With ayahuasca.
exactly, which, you do you. But my
Yeah.
take is shadow work is simply the process of being honest with yourself about all aspects of yourself. And that's not just bad stuff, it's the good and the bad. Some people are really connected to their negative qualities, but fully shadowed from their power or their creativity or their pleasure or their joy or whatever. And so shadow work is, am I willing to look at all of it? All of the me's that live inside this thing we call the mind, am I willing to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between? And shadow work is the process. It's the how to do that. And I use the acronym A.L.I.G.N because it's an acronym, which makes me happy, but also because it's an easy way when people are like, well, how can I align my mind or do shadow work? Let's make it really practical. And so align, do you want me to go through the acronym with each of the letters?
Yeah, please. I would love it.
So, and this works for my own process, but it also is a great relational tool. And we can talk about how to use it and where. But the A is acknowledge. It just means let's say I have a thought that I'm mad at someone. I acknowledge whether or not it's logical, whether or not I'm right, it doesn't really matter. The A is you start just to acknowledge you're having a thought. The very act of doing that is going to slow the cortisol. It's going to take you out of fight, flight, freeze. Acknowledging doesn't mean agreeing. It means it's validating. Like, hey, you're having a feeling of anger. I see you. Great. That's it. That's all you're doing. Then the L is really listening. What is this anger needing? I'm listening for, is there a need under here? Is it a need to be seen? Is it a need to have an injustice corrected? But underneath everything we think is either going to be a need or a desire or a fear or a wound or something on the negative side. It could also be a desire or, some type of celebration or joy that we're not letting ourselves have. But we're just listening to, all right, what is this thought actually saying to me? And then the I is investigate. If I care about you as a person, I'm going to ask you questions if you come to me and you're like, oh my God, I'm so raging mad, I could punch someone. If I care about you, I'm going to say, oh my gosh, you're really angry. Well, I want to understand more. Like, tell me what's going on. But we're not trained to do that for ourselves. It feels weird when people are like, are you telling me to talk to myself? It's like, yeah, we do it all day anyway. I'm just saying, let's make the dialogue more conscious. So ask yourself questions, starting with, okay, well, have I eaten today? Have I slept? Did I just get out of a bad conversation? Like what's the context that this feeling is happening in? We got to do some investigating. And then the G is gratitude, but not gratitude out. It's gratitude in. Again, when I was taught the benefits, the psychological medicine of gratitude, I was never taught, you know what, you get to take that inward too. Thank you, brain, for trying to help me. Thank you, parts, for trying to keep me alive. If you're alive, your brain has done something to keep you that way. Gratitude inward gives you the same benefits as gratitude out. And then the N, so acknowledge, listen, investigate, give gratitude to yourself. And then the N is negotiate. And that's where we want to figure out, like, what's available right now. I'm not willing to do this, but I'm willing to do this. And negotiating with ourselves is only a problem if we're lying to ourselves. I'll start tomorrow. I'll stop drinking on Monday. Like, that's not a negotiation. That's a dissociation. Negotiation is, all right, I hear you're angry. I'm not okay with us yelling at people or punching people, but I do think that maybe we need some time off tonight from things that we might be obliged to do, and we need to do some extra work. I mean, it can't always be that. But the N is negotiate, which is you helping your parts know what are their choices right now, what's available, and what makes the most sense.
Which there's no world in which, because negotiation implies that you can see several pathways forward. And so you can't, there's no N until and unless you've done the steps before to get to there, right? Because when you're pre-align, anger sees one avenue. Flight, if that's your tendency, fight, if that's your tendency, fawn, if that's, that's the only, it's like, it's an if this, then this. But what you're doing in the align process is you're capturing the anger, acknowledging it, listening to it, investigating it, thanking it with the gratitude. And now, after all of that, now I can see 4 or 5 possibilities. And now I get to figure out which one is going to, meet what's available to me, what's available to the other person, the person that I'm angry at, like what's possible in that relationship. But none of that can be seen until you have done the process that you just described.
Exactly. And a lot of arguments relationally are people trying to negotiate before they've done any acknowledgement or listening or investigating or gratitude or anything inward. And so we're just reacting to each other. We're not responding consciously from self. We're just letting our part. And I know when I'm arguing with my partner, if one of my parts is in charge of the dialogue, it doesn't go well.
Nope. No, one of your parts versus one of your partner's parts is going to, it's going to just get stuck in a cycle.
Kablooey. Yes.
Kablooey, to use the
Kablooey
diagram.
is how I call it. Yes.
And your partner is a physicist?
He was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, so he knows physics really well. And so I'm like, here's how fusion works. When atoms combine, you get a kablooey. When people's parts combine, they get a kablooey. So it's like fusion. And he's like shaking his head. He's like, and he's very
not proud of you right now.
He's like, that's not how physics works. Technically, the atoms create instability event. It's like, okay, I'm taking great liberty with the physics. And I put a footnote in there.
You did.
Thank you, husband.
You did. It was, you know what it was? It was good enough. It was serving your it was serving your purpose. It wouldn't perhaps, serve the purpose of a nuclear engineer for the Navy, but it serves your purpose. Yeah.
Works for me just great.
Thanks. Kablooey. And as a couple of therapists, I can say it is kablooey. That is
It is so kablooey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the self-doubt and the negative self-talk, this inner critic, because that is so central to all of this. And so you already talked about how we can transform our inner critic into a really high-performing coach. But what is our inner critic trying to keep us safe from? What is the function of our inner critic? But help us understand it so that then we can turn it into a coach.
Yeah. And then aligning with your parts is a really good way to approach the inner critic. What happens with the inner critic is because it's so loud and often so mean, we make the assumption that either it's totally right and we collapse, or we make the assumption that it's totally wrong and we ignore it. And there's a kernel of truth in most of the things we tell ourselves. So if I tell myself, and I have an inner critic who isn't always properly fed and watered and managed. Sometimes it's like, you suck, writing a book, who do you think you are to write another book? Like, this is not going to go well. That's not altogether right, but it's also not altogether wrong. And the kernel of truth in that is it's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to like it. And so I want to honor that you're trying to protect me from rejection and shame and being cast out of the group by being mean. Doesn't mean I'm going to believe you, but I'm neither going to subscribe or unsubscribe from you. I'm going to acknowledge, listen, investigate, give gratitude, and then negotiate with you.
That's wonderful. Because I do think, right, it's like I'm here for us recognizing that we have an inner critic and that's not the sum total of us, of who we are, and that it doesn't speak total capital T truth. It oftentimes is the internalized critical voice of a parent, but the antidote isn't total banishment. I think that's very good because oftentimes we do that 180. At the basic level, it's unkind because if what you're wanting us to know is that there are no bad parts, there's something to be learned, honored, explored with all of our parts, then we miss that opportunity if we just try to banish the inner critic.
Exactly. And anyone who's ever tried to silence an inner voice knows it doesn't go well. If you try to silence your inner voices long enough, you're going to end up in some really unfortunate habit or pattern or relationship cycle because there is no way to quiet them. And so again, if you can't banish them and you can't get rid of them and you can't shame them or yell at them, the only option left is to align with them and become in relationship. It's sort of like family therapy taken inwards, which is what Dick Schwartz's approach was. As a family therapist, he noticed, hey, the same kind of stuff seems to be happening inside people's heads. And so once you start to understand the inner critic, it doesn't turn the voice off, but it does give you the tools to manage it so it's not as loud for as long, and it doesn't drive you to then make choices that don't align with your values.
Right. Because the choices that a part makes are pain-fueled choices. They're reactive. They're reactive choices. They're choices that are under the umbrella of one of the 4 Fs, right? Fight,
Right.
fright,
They're
flee.
kablooey choices.
They're kablooey choices because that's all they know. Right. That's what parts know to do. All right. So take us into the realm of couples. We've already said that when one of my parts is in dialogue with one of my partner's parts, it's a kablooey. So how do we fit together this inner work and relational work? That's a big question.
And I don't do couple therapy, and I have
Mm-hmm.
great admiration for you and everyone else who does, because that's too many parts for me and my parts to have to manage. So, in the book, I think I said the relationship equation is this: me plus you equals more than two. Because in any couple, you've got the self of the person, and then all their child parts, and all of their teen parts, and all of their parts. And so, if you don't know how parts operate, it's going to be really difficult to know when a good time is to engage in conversation. Like, again, not in a codependent way, but if my husband comes home from work and I can tell that he's sort of dominated by a part that might be frustrated or tired, it's not my job to tend to him and take care of him, but I can go, okay, he's got a tired part online right now, which is probably not a good time to tell him something that I did wrong, that I need to have a, skillful adult conversation with, or ask for something or whatever. But that's not codependence. That's just parts literacy. And it's not like I can say to him, well, your tired parts are online. So go tell them to sit down because I need to talk to you about something. But it's about also taking my projections away because of my childhood trauma. If he came home in a mood, and I would immediately go, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? And then my parts would poke at him until like I got a reaction, which would then affirm there's something wrong with me, until I learned how to not do that. So understanding your own parts will also help you know which conversations to show up for, which ones to pause. If we're having a hard conversation and it's getting late and we're both tired, neither of us, no human does well arguing when you're tired. And so we can both have enough parts literacy to be like, you know what? This conversation is probably not going to go well if we keep going. So we're going to hit pause, get a good night's sleep, and we will return to it tomorrow when we have more self available. And he doesn't even study parts work. He just has a general sense of my best, most capable adult self is not available to do this right now. So let's not. And parts work makes couple problems so much easier to have clarity on and to manage, because the dishes aren't always about the dishes, right? The toilet seat is not about the toilet seat. There's a lot of other dynamics and parts at play. And so it's such a useful framework for humaning with another person, romantically or in any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. You explained it so well. I love that the parts literacy, which I think that's a great term, parts literacy, is both for me and for my partner. It is me recognizing, how do I bring self into a conversation, because that tees us up for success, because I am calm, I am curious, I am compassionate, I am connected. So that's a way of kind of putting the wind at our back conversationally. And if my partner's not in that place in that moment, it's not for me to double and triple down to shift them, to either punish them for not being in that place or do something different so that they can be in that place, or figure out what I did wrong that got them to that place. So it just, it puts both of us kind of back in our own lane.
Exactly. And if you have two people that do know about parts, again, my husband's not in the wellness world. He's not in the psychology world. But as I was going through this thing with my family, I could say to him, I have some child parts, and he's obviously followed my work and read my stuff. So he knows enough. And I could say, my child parts are feeling a little sad right now. I'm not trauma dumping on him. I'm not looking to him to save me from self. I'm just letting him know, hey, I'm a little sensitive right now. Like
Yes.
the unit we call Britt is a little edgy. And so my child parts are mine to manage, but I just want to let you know they're kind of up right now. So if we have a house project we need to figure out the logistics on, can it wait till maybe tomorrow or next week or next month? And it's just a great way to communicate to your person where you are and who you are in a moment, so that we can manage expectations of each other.
Yeah. It makes me think, yesterday I had my, I'm teaching at Northwestern right now, and I had office hours, and one of my students came to office hours, and there's a couple of possibilities for their final paper. one of the possibilities is what I call the love template interview, where they go into their family system and talk to their caregivers, their parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, the elders that really shaped their experiences of intimate relationship. And she's got divorced parents and a tight relationship with mom and a strained relationship with dad. And she was very, very excited about this project. And she's like, even though my relationship with my dad is really complicated, I think it's going to be a neat opportunity to connect with him. But then 2 weeks ago, my boyfriend of X number of years and I broke up. And now I don't think that I can call forward the part of me that knows how to have an adult to adult conversation with my dad with curiosity, I think that my wounded child would be in the driver's seat, wanting and craving things from him because I'm just so tender from the breakup. And I was like, my work here is done. Like, you got, like, yes.
A plus.
A plus. You got it, girl. You got it. Yeah. That, of course, there's not enough. What she was saying in your language is there would not be enough self available right now because of the strain and heartbreak of the breakup to do this thing with her dad that she knows would potentially be illuminating and clarifying and really important and kind of bolstering of self for her to be able to speak to her dad in a way that was led by curiosity and kind of disentangle, the dad he couldn't be to her from understanding the man that he is, key, really key, but not right now.
Not right now. Oh, I love that. And where it gets a little tricky is this codependency thing of, well, your job is to be a parent to my parts. And I can extend compassion to your parts based on the situation. But if I start trying to be the parent of your parts, we've now created a very, very unhealthy attachment dynamic. And to me, codependency redefined is codependency is an effort by one of my child parts to take care of one of your child parts. And now we've got two kids in the driver's seat, and that's not going to go very well, generally speaking.
No, it's not. It's not. It's beautiful to have two people who are healing their own parts side by side with each other. That's real lovely. That's real lovely.
It really is. And love is often being able to speak to your partner on behalf of your parts and not as the parts. And what that looks like is calmly and skillfully saying, hey, can we have a conversation? When you did a thing, I had a feeling about it and it's bothering me and I'd like to talk to you about it. That is me speaking on behalf of my parts. Speaking as the part, it's how could you do the thing again? You always do this and you never do that. That is when your parts have the microphone, not self. I call it the who has the mic exercise. Like, don't show up to your partner if one of your parts has the mic, because that's probably going to be not great.
I love it. Okay. You just kind of snuck this in here and I was like, oh, Britt went there. So you pose a challenge to the world of attachment styles and I'm so here for it. And I know also that Dan Siegel would be here for it. So that made me feel like I think that he would be like A plus. Yes. So you get it. You said rather than wanting us to think about ourselves having an attachment style, you encourage us to ask instead, what is my attachment style in this relationship? I was like, the angels were singing. I was like, yes, 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 yes. Okay, why? Why does it matter? Why was it important for you to help us reimagine our relationship with attachment styles? That's bold.
And I have great respect for attachment theory and the decades of research that have gone into understanding how it works. But when you take the lens of multiplicity, that we have all of these different parts that are all of these different ages, my really scared, shy 7-year-old self is going to show up with a different attachment style than I can do it all by myself and I don't need anyone feeling rejected 16-year-old self. And so the question isn't, are you an anxious avoidant? Are you ambivalent? Are you just disorganized? It's with the person we're talking about, how do you show up? I can show up very securely attached to certain friends. I show up more anxious with others. And again, it doesn't mean there's anything necessarily wrong with the relationship. I just have certain parts that pop online with certain people. My attachment style at work is going to look a lot different than my attachment style with a romantic partner. And so this idea of I have this one attachment style that I can claim doesn't really cover the complexity of how different parts show up in different relationships. So in my opinion, a more useful application of attachment theory is which attachment style tends to show up in which types of relationships. And then I'll know which parts those are, and then I can manage them and parent them and love them better.
This is a round of applause. I love it. I love it. I love
I'm
it.
so relieved.
Oh yeah.
Whew.
It's so good. It's so good. It makes immensely more sense to me than this idea of this is, who I am in a unitary way. Okay, before I let you go, I want to know what new parts of yourself you discovered in writing this book.
Oh my gosh, this whole book, every chapter that I worked on where I'm all like, I'm good with imposter stuff. I don't call it syndrome because it's human, it's just a part. But like, I'm fine with impostery stuff. Oh, no, sure. Nope. The shadow work part, when I talked about trauma, I'm like, nope, I've dealt with my trauma. It's like, nope, here it is. So I don't know if I encountered any brand new parts, but any parts that I had left untended and ignored, they all kind of said, hello.
Hi, we're still here.
We're still here. You're still
Uh-huh.
going to therapy and taking your meds right now because we're not done. And that's great. That's wonderful.
Writing a book is so freaking vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. And writing a book, I mean, maybe not all writers of all books, but writing a book like this, right? Like when we write from our lived experience, clinical experience, yeah, it's so vulnerable. So there were parts of you, right, impostery parts, and yeah, parts that still carry old pain that were right there with you as you wrote.
And
Mhm.
deadline parts. And we don't get to just sit with our work and just take as long as we want. It's like, nope, we've got a deadline. So we got stuff to do. And child parts and teenage parts. It was a parts extravaganza in my head, the whole process of writing the book. So yay, being triggered is such a great opportunity for
It is.
wholeness.
And I'm glad that you persisted through it because it's a fantastic book and I'm very excited to celebrate it on Reimagining Love. I know this episode is going to land really deeply for people. You're speaking the language of the Reimagining Love listener, and I just have so much respect for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And I'll have a vulnerability hangover later, but I'm so happy that we got to talk about all the things.
Me too. Me too. Thank you. Thank you for, when you could have chosen anything to talk about with that first question, and you let us in on something really important that is so, as she does a little throw up. Yeah, it is, and it's fresh. And I respect that. And it's real. There's so many people. So who knows? And you may never know how your story about what you just have gone through with your family of origin, you may never know how it lands for somebody, the way that it gave them permission, the way that it gave them comfort. You may never know, but I have every confidence that you shared it for a reason and that you shared it for good. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Britt, we're going to have all of the stuff in the show notes, but how do you want people to find you? We want people to go get Align Your Mind from one of the local indie booksellers. So we'll link that. But what else? What are your other places that you want people to come and be with you?
Come find me. I'm on Instagram at Britt Frank, and you can find me on my website, brittfrank.com.
Thank you so much, Britt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Britt, for returning as a guest and joining me today for this wonderful conversation. I love this idea that greater parts literacy allows us to navigate our relationships with more clarity, more presence, and of course, helps us avoid kablooies. I think that's so practical and so hopeful. You can learn more about Britt Frank and her new book, Align Your Mind, Tame Your Inner Critic, and Make Peace with Your Shadow using the power of parts work by checking out the links in our show notes. Until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.